Okay, today I'm going to go over your basic maintenance for a motorized bicycle, what you need to keep one on the road. Once you identify a problem area, you may want to do some research on the required steps to take to fix it. I'm not going to do every bit of the maintenance on the bike here. I just want to show you in general what you need to do. Now obviously this here is a vintage bike frame here, but even if you have a brand new one, your maintenance is going to be the same. Let's start at the back. We'll work our way forward. The majority of the problems that a lot of people have on a motorized bike is the chain coming off. Typically that is caused for the most part by improper setup. The sprocket and the rag joint that is used from the kit allows a certain amount of side-to-side play if you don't set it up properly, and if you have enough side-to-side play that is going to be wider than the width of your chain, you're going to have problems with the chain coming off. So number one, you want to make sure that your chain is reasonably snug. Here I'm pulling on it and I can feel a bit of tension. This is a properly tensioned chain. You typically will have your chain tensioner here. You loosen the bolt here. Quite often you will need to take a screwdriver and come in from the back side to hold the bolt still, so you can loosen the nut with a 14mm wrench, and then you raise the plastic wheel here, raise it up in order to get the proper amount of tension on your chain. You might need to move your chain tensioner back if you run out of travel here on the wheel. I've got videos showing how to properly set up the rag joint and check it. It's very similar to checking a wheel for being true. Basically, you will look at it from the back, spin the wheel, and if your sprocket has side-to-side play any wider than the width of the chain, it's going to have a tendency to come off. You want to check your bearings on your axle immediately when you get the bike. Even if you buy a bike brand new, sometimes just in shipping things get knocked around. You can hold the bike securely, grab the wheel and pull on it to side, and if you see any play in there, and actually I can see a little bit of play on this one here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the wheel and move it side to side, and you can see there's a little bit of slop in the wheel here. You can see that the axle is fixed on the frame. The axle's not moving, at least it shouldn't be. And if your wheel is able to move on the axle, you need to tighten up the cone nuts on your bearings. Basically, here is an axle here. On the opposite side of the bike, you have the race here, the bearing race, which tightens up against the bearing, and then on the other side, the brake arm side here, you've got the brake cam, which has a face which rides against the bearing. If these here aren't properly snugged up against the bearings, you will have play in your wheel. So you will need to adjust your cone nuts. There's plenty of videos showing you how to do that as well. If you ride your bike a lot, I would suggest greasing the bearings every 90 days, or other than that, grease your bearings every 60 days, and routinely check your rear wheel for any side-to-side play. If you get side-to-side play in it, your bearings will wear out quicker. Okay, I've got an old fork that I'm using here to show how you check the wheel to see if the wheel is true enough. You can use another bike, turn the bike upside down. Obviously we don't have the tire on this one here, just the important bits. And you, ideally you can have something fixed, something that you can clamp on, and you want to get something close to the rim, and then you spin it to check the side-to-side play on it. Okay, so here's a detail of what we're wanting to do. You're going to spin your wheel, and then we're going to check for side-to-side play on the wheel. Now I will take, ideally you want something that's fixed, but just for the sake of the video here, I'm holding this piece of paper up here, and right there it's rubbing. So we'll pull it back a little bit so it doesn't rub. There, we got a little bit of a gap. And there I've got, I'd say, less than about 1/16, eighth of an inch of side-to-side play. Now here where it's almost rubbing, we need to pull the wheel this way here. And if the wheel is moving, if your run out is over this way here, you need to pull the wheel in this direction, and you do that by tightening up the spokes that go to the to this side here. So if I need to move the wheel this way here, I will tighten up a couple of spokes here. Normally it's about 2 or 3 spokes in succession where you need to do that. You can purchase a spoke tightening tool, or a good small 6-inch crescent will work. You just take your time to get the tool on there properly, work it back and forth, tighten it up once you've got it snug, and then just picture you've got the nipple here that screws in that way, so it turns clockwise. So if I wanted to tighten up this spoke here, I would then, looking at it from this direction here, turn the nipple clockwise to tighten it up, and that would then pull the rim to the right here. Another problem area on these motors is the rear mount here. A lot of people will have issues with the rear mount, the studs, breaking. And here's the stud, here are the studs here, the 2 studs here. It can be caused by improper alignment when your motor is initially installed. Sometimes if the angle isn't ideal for your standard mount, sometimes people will mount it and then they'll bend the mount here. Bend the mount to where it's not flush against the seat tube here. That if it's torqued on it, like let's say the seat tube is here and then you've got this piece here, I'm exaggerating, to where it's not flush against it here, that will put additional stress on the mounting studs here and cause them to break. So you want to make sure that your motor is snug, your motor does not move on it. Under no circumstances do you ever put rubber between the mount and the frame. Cars use rubber motor mounts, but they're manufactured, they're engineered for it. These thin studs here cannot handle the movement as well. It will cause alignment issues with your chain, and you'll wind up breaking either your studs or cracking your frame if you put rubber between it. So don't do that. You want to make sure that your motor is securely mounted to the frame. That will alleviate a lot of problems as well. You can get upgraded grade 8 studs either from your hardware store or order them online. Check the link down below. I'll show you where you can get a good mounting kit for it. Okay, another area that you want to check and make sure that things are adjusted properly is your clutch. Make sure that your clutch is adjusted properly. When you pull in on your clutch lever, you should have an immediate response here on the clutch arm. If not, you need to loosen the little bolt here or the screw here. Pull on the cable, pull it tight. I'll use 2 pairs of pliers. I'll use a pair of needle nose pliers and get it right against the arm, and then a heavier pair of pliers to pull out hard on it. crimp down on the cable when you've got it pulled tight, then tighten up your screw here, or you may have the brass piece with the screw that goes directly on the cable wire itself. Keep that adjusted properly. These two-stroke motors vibrate a bit, so you routinely want to check and make sure that your mounting hardware is secure on it. This is cheap hardware on these bikes, so you don't want to get them super tight. That's also a problem. A lot of people will over tighten the hardware and things wind up coming loose. The blue Loctite will be your friend. I will put blue Loctite on the intake here. That'll keep it from vibrating off. And if you have the offset, a longer intake piece here that moves the carburetor back because of clearance issues, those are more prone to coming loose here at the intake. If they do come loose, you're going to have some performance issues. Make sure that your carburetor is snug. I would say about every 3 months, clean your air filter here inside. Take your 2 screws off. Take some WD-40 or even some gasoline and clean the, or brake parts cleaner, carburetor cleaner. Clean your foam filter there. Dry it off real good. Don't use flames to dry it off, huh? And put it back in. Check your cylinder head where it mounts to the cylinder here and look for any oil. That would be a sign of a leak of your gasket here, of your surface where the cylinder head mounts to the cylinder. I would say you get a brand new bike, run it for, I don't know, a couple of days, off and on, let the bike cool, and check your torque. Here, I think it's 12 foot-pounds. Check your torque on your cylinder head. There's your specs there. Your muffler, your exhaust mount here, that is prone to coming loose. You want to make sure that these here have the blue Loctite thread locking compound on the studs. And here is where your magneto coil wires come out that go to the CDI. If you're going to ride your bike in the wet stuff at all, you want to put some clear silicone, some silicone RTV to seal this hole up. If you get any water in here into your magneto coil area, it'll fry the magneto and will more than likely cause the bike to stall on you. Now this one here is a little bit of a custom setup here for the spark plug wire. You just have the plastic boot which will push onto the spark plug. There are 2 different types. This here I call the shorty. With the shorty type, you can look inside there, and this here is manufactured to fit on the brass adapter here on your spark plug. You can screw the brass adapter off. The harder plastic spark plug caps, if you look inside, are much smaller, and you have a threaded post on your spark plug, and they go on there. So you want to make sure that your spark plug is properly connected to your spark plug wire. As well, make sure that your spark plug is firmly seated against the cylinder head, that it's torqued up properly. One thing you never want to do is remove your spark plug when the motor is hot. You can strip the threads very easily, so be careful of that. Now this bike has a custom expansion chamber on it. Now here is the standard muffler. Here, the standard exhaust. And here is the bottom side of the exhaust. You have a nut that holds the cap on. I've had a few of these nuts come loose. So you want to remove the nut and put a thread locking compound on it, the blue Loctite on it, and snug it up. And that should keep that from coming off. But routinely check that nut and make sure that that nut is securely on to keep your cap on. You can run the bike without the cap. It's louder. It's not that good on the rings, some say, and some people say that they run them wide, run them open. But as well with a 2-stroke, you do need some back pressure to take advantage of the nature of the 2-stroke and to get the proper performance off of a 2-stroke. So that's why you've got the small hole here in comparison to the large hole, the inlet on the muffler. So keep your cap on. Your neighbors will appreciate it, if nothing else, and your bike will run better. Okay, your carburetor has the float in it. The gas comes in your gas line, and there's a float that's adjustable in there. And what that float does is it lets the bowl of the carburetor fill up with gas, and when it's filled, the float rises, and it basically has a little pin, a plunger, that stops up the gas line, the inlet, and stops gas from going into the carburetor. That's what maintains your fuel level in your carburetor. Sometimes if you get dirt in it, you may have gas coming out of the back end of the carburetor here as well. You would have some performance issues, and in which case you would need to service the carburetor. You can remove the screw, remove your carburetor cap, the fuel line, pull your carburetor off, and service it. I've got video showing you how to do that. We're not going to go into that today, but if you do have fuel coming out of the back of your carburetor, you need to service the carburetor. The carburetors, as they come from the factory, typically are a bit too rich, so you can go with a smaller jet. I'm here at sea level, and they like a number 59, a number 60 jet. You can do some research on where you can get the jets. They're called, it's a 5mm jet for a Del Orto SHA carburetor. You can get them from some of the moped places. You can get them from eBay, and some of the motorized bicycle parts dealers stock those items. Your carburetor must be pushed all the way on to the intake. There are slots here on the carburetor. The carburetor, you can see the slots here. There's 4 slots here that allow it to open up to slide into the, to allow the intake to slide into the carburetor. Then you tighten it up. However, you can even see, like right here, you can see that dark spot. Well, that's a hole that air can go into. So if your intake isn't pushed back beyond where those slots are, you'll be sucking air in, and your bike is not going to run properly. So if you checking for an air intake leak, look for that. You can be sucking air in there, or as well, if you have a problem with the gasket or your intake is loose, you can be sucking air in, and you'll have performance issues there. As well, there are videos and information on how to track down an intake leak. We're not going to go into any more detail on that. Okay, here is your CDI. Your CDI has a blue wire and a black wire, and your motor on the front of it there, right here, has a blue and a black wire comes out, and you merely connect the blue to the blue and the black to the black to make the bike run. And then, of course, put your spark plug wire to the spark plug. Rarely do the CDIs go out. However, never say never. There are specs you can check with a voltmeter to test them, or if you're having problems, I would recommend purchasing a magneto coil and a CDI and replace them both. Quite often, if a bike has a no spark condition, your problem is your magneto coil. You have the magnet in here, which a lot of people will call the magneto, and some people call the coil the magneto, but they are 2 different components. And inside, if you remove this cover, you have this here, and then you have the spinning magnet here, and that is what generates the spark. This one here has 3 wires. The white wire you can use for a 6-volt light, but it does not provide much power. I just cut it off and then discard the white wire. It's dead to me. But you've got 4 screws that hold the magneto coil onto the motor case there. Pretty easy to replace. Push your wires through, and you're good to go. These here don't cost that much, but the majority of the times when you have a no spark condition, this is your problem here, the magneto coil. Okay, next up is your fuel system here. Your fuel system, I like to run my bikes at a 40-to-1 premix ratio, and basically what that means is 40 parts gas to 1 part oil. I achieve that by using a 1 gallon gas can, and in that put about almost 4 ounces, 3.5 ounces, you want to be exact, of a good 2-stroke oil to 1 gallon of gas. Give it a nice little shake and use that. If your bike has been sitting up for a long time, quite possibly you have sour gas. The oil starts to coagulate and just weird stuff happens. It forms a varnish, and you can get some nasty stuff in your gas tank, in your fuel line, and in your carburetor. Typically it'll manifest itself in the carburetor by clogging up your float, and then your carburetor will be flooding. So make sure, if you do buy a used bike and you're wanting to get it going, I would recommend draining the gas, getting rid of it, and putting fresh gas in. 40-to-1 mix. Don't use a break-in. These things here, you don't want to put a lot of oil in break-in. You want to kind of help the piston ring seat, and go with just 40-to-1 from day one until you're no longer running the bike anymore. And that works fine. You have a fuel filter here in line. It does have a direction on it. You will notice an arrow. Basically it has the cap end here on the fuel line, and that goes on the carburetor side of it. You want to make sure that you run it with the fuel line. There is a fuel filter on the petcock where it goes into the gas tank. So if you're not getting enough gas to the carburetor, that's quite possibly clogged. I typically will throw those away and don't use them. Okay, so you've got your fuel line here. If you're having issues getting fuel to the carburetor, you can have a clogged fuel filter. These fuel filters that come from the factory are fairly cheap. Quite often they'll last, or as well they'll leak. So if you got one that's leaking, go ahead and replace it. Go to the auto store, get you a fuel filter for a 1/4 inch fuel line. As well, get you some good fuel line while you're at it. The fuel line that comes brand new in the kits, they do have a tendency to shrink. As well, if you're building using the kit itself, the stock fuel line is fine, but over time it will shrink. So don't get a tight fit on your fuel line. Give it a little extra length, keeping in mind that it's going to shrink on both ends here. The petcock here, where it goes into the gas tank, has a built-in fuel filter. It screws out here. What I do from day one, I unscrew it and throw that part away. Put me some Teflon tape on the threads, put the red seal on it, and tighten it up. And I depend upon the inline fuel filter. There's no need in having two. This way here, if it gets clogged up, you can see the sediment in the trash in your fuel filter. It's easier to identify problems that way. Another problem that some will have on these bikes here, if you have a condition where you're not getting fuel, quite often it's the gas cap. And this one doesn't want to come off easily. The gas cap, these are vented here. Sometimes if they don't vent properly, there's a hole up under here somewhere as well. You've got the holes here. The idea, if you have this totally sealed and you've got liquid escaping and there's no air going in, well, you're going to get a vapor lock here and you're not going to get fuel coming out. So what you can do, what you can do is drill a hole in the cap here and do it off of the gas tank, because you could create a spark, gasoline, major problem. But you can drill just a small hole in your gas cap here using a fine drill bit here, and that could eliminate your problem there of the vapor lock. One thing that a lot of people do with these bikes here, with these particular gas tanks here, is they over tighten the mounts here. These studs here are welded onto the bottom of the gas tank, and they're prone to cracking and leaking if you over tighten the gas tank. And as you can see, this one here will have some flex and play in it, and I leave it like that. I do not tighten up the gas tank to where it's super tight. If it gets hit, I want it to be able to move, as opposed to damaging the gas tank and possibly rupturing it and causing problems. I just tighten it up to the point to where it doesn't move when the bike is in operation, and you should be good to go there. Another point that needs maintenance quite often is the throttle. The manufacturers spared a lot of expense on these throttles. They're cheap plastic. You don't want to over tighten the screws here. And this nut here is forever coming loose. A little bit of blue Loctite on it. Do not over tighten this here. This is plastic, and I'm just barely tightening this up here, barely snugging it up, and you should be good to go there. You've got your 2 screws here. Make sure that it is fully seated here, and you're able to operate the throttle here. The throttle grip is smooth. One thing you want to check for is that there's no play in the cable here. Actually, what you want to do is tighten this up and pull back and forth. Here I have play on the cable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen it up to where I have just a little bit of play. And I'll use my thread locking compound here. And I have about maybe 1/8 of an inch of play, and that's fine there. One area that will take a beating on these motorized bikes is your steering tube bearings in here. You want to make sure that you don't have any play here. If you do, you want to tighten it up. And all I needed to do was tighten this down here just a little bit to get the slop out of the bearings. There we go, we've got no play there. You want to make sure that your stem is fully pushed into the steering tube and tightened up. Your handlebars are tight and snug. Your clutch lever, I don't like having the clutch lever really tight. That way if the bike was to get hit, the clutch lever could get knocked out of the way. Some people want to get this stuff real super tight. I just get it tight enough to where it doesn't come loose in operation, and that works for me. You want to check your front axle just like you would your rear axle. Check it for number one, even that your axle nuts are properly tightened up on the front wheel. Vibration is a problem. The fenders can be an issue in operation here. If your fender were to ever come loose in operation and slide forward. So you want to check your mounting bracket here where it mounts to the frame. Check your supports here. Check your supports in the back as well where the fender screws into the front of the frame. You want to make sure that that is snugged up good and doesn't crack. If your fender is starting to crack, it could come loose, slide up under the wheel, get between the wheel and the road, and you're going to wreck the bike like that. So I hope you found the video helpful. If you have any questions, I'll try to help you out the best I can. or refer you to someone who can. Thanks for watching. If you like my videos, give me a thumbs up. Appreciate it.